43 days ago, President Donald Trump gave Russia an ultimatum: agree to a ceasefire in Ukraine within 10 to 12 days or face severe consequences. It has been 230 days since he took office, promising to end the war in just 24 hours. Instead of peace, the conflict has only intensified. The key question now: will Donald Trump finally back up his words with action in his dealings with dictator Putin? Joining me now is Professor Darin Gerdes, Chair of Leadership Programs. Many of you know him as the host of the YouTube channel Professor Gerdes Explains. He has also been a strong voice in support of Ukraine in the United States. Professor Gerdes, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
You know, since our last talk, I just wanted to tell you how many people that are actually your huge fans was writing me and suggesting me a lot of help to the Ukrainian forces, sending some donations, cars and everything. So thank you for that. Thank you for that. That you have such a nice
audience. Happy to help any way I can.
Yes. So today, European and American leaders are supposed to meet to discuss additional sanctions against Russia. So my question is it's not about that. Will they impose that or not? Will the United States impose further sanctions or not? My question is, do you think that the West has already exhausted its sanctions potential?
No, every time they impose another round of stinging sanctions, I think, why didn't you do that last time or the time before or the time before, right? I mean, certainly some things could emerge, like you realize that some Russian shadow fleet ships are somehow, we found these and we didn't know that they were doing it, but like you knew what most of them were. So you could have done this earlier. I think the problem that we have is more of a lack of will than a lack of ability, and that's both European and within the United States.
But okay, I can understand why we have some lack of will in the Oval Office, but why do we have that in Europe?
Okay, so I think that over the last couple of decades, let's say, Europe has not really kept up militarily like they probably should have. Here's one of the places where Donald Trump was right, and there's not a lot of these, right? So here's one of put up 2% or more of military, support into NATO, and reluctantly they dragged their feet. Now they're all saying yes, we're going to get to 2%, or we're going to actually go to 3, 4, 5%. So Donald Trump was right about that, but Putin really drove that. It's really, they wouldn't have been doing this if Putin wasn't the threat that he is to Europe and clearly into Ukraine. So think about your own home. If you didn't stock the cupboard like you should have for a long time, you're pretty slim on the food that you have. If you had been putting it in, you'd have a robust stock of what you can, and that's what's going on with Europe. So they know that they don't have the quantities and the means to do what they really, really would need to do in order to take on Russia, and so they're slow, but they talk a lot. And sometimes the talking works. Right. Sometimes the threat is enough, and this is what Putin's been doing to the West. The threat is as sufficient to have the battle as the battle. And so if he can get his way by threatening, by saying, we're not leaving unless we get all 4 oblasts, and if he gets it, bonanza for him, right? If he had to fight for it, it would take him years if he could possibly get it, right? So it would at least take him years, and it's a question whether he could even take the 4 oblasts, right? So, yeah, so the threat is sometimes a very powerful weapon. I think that goes back to Clausewitz.
Yeah, so when at the beginning of a full-scale invasion, everybody was asking in Ukraine, why is Europe is not helping us enough? Maybe because they do not have that enough. I'm talking about the weapon, basically.
Yeah, I don't know if they were motivated by that early on, or if they were. So look, everybody got it wrong. Nobody thought Ukraine was as tough as Ukraine is. Everybody, like from the United States saying, hey, Zelensky, do you need a ride out? And the famous reply of, I need ammunition, not a ride. Nobody thought that Ukraine was going to last. And here we are 1,300 days later, and Ukraine's still holding on and punishing the Russians on their land. So I don't know that it was because they didn't feel like they had enough or because they just didn't think it was going to take very long for the second army in the world to be able to roll over Ukraine, which turned out to be a really bad idea.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, Mr. Gerdes, I don't know about you, but I'm always thinking, why is everyone tired of the war but not tired of Putin? I mean, do you notice this trend? Trump is annoyed by the war, but not by the dictator.
Yeah.
And fair enough, we as a Ukrainians don't expect much from him anymore. But ordinary people are also starting to pick up this tendency and trend.
Yeah, Putin is the cause of all of this, and we should put the blame where it is. Even the secondary sanctions that we're talking about are going to punish India to get them to stop doing the thing rather than just directly punish Putin. I don't think Trump has any appetite to directly punish Putin. He just said the other day that he doesn't want to hurt his relationship with Putin, which, I mean, at a certain point, you just got to go, look, this guy's bad. Like, you gotta get away from whatever it was that you thought that you understood about him, but he's problematic. It's going to be worse if you let this fester, and you're going to have a black eye to your reputation for all of time. So, but Trump just can't seem to see beyond that.
I'm just opening the news and I see like how lightning strikes the TV tower in Kyiv, and I'm like, seriously, are we not enough of everything? And now lightning, we have a lot of fires in Kyiv and the region because of the lightning striking everything. So no, just a comment. So
hey, lightning struck a Russian command post not too long ago. So I mean, I'll take the tower for the command post.
Yeah, I'll take that too, of course. So, Mr. Gerdes, about the Ministry of War, the idea of renaming the U.S. Department of Defense, do you see any, significant message behind this, or is it just noise and not something that really signals that U.S. preparing for war with someone?
That's a great question. It's noise, not the signal. In fact, it's actually deceptive. What I mean by that is, so there's a couple of things here. So the Department of War is what the Department of Defense was called for the first 170 some odd years of its existence from George Washington forward. It was renamed the it was recombined from the Army and the Department of the Navy and created as the Department of Defense after World War II. And so, I mean, changing the name doesn't mean anything. I don't know that the executive order actually meant anything either, because it's supposed to take an act of Congress to really change the name, as far as I understand. But okay, that's all noise, not signal. The real issue is far deeper than that, and that is that doctrinally there is a so in the United States, our doctrine is that we have the ability to compete in compete's perhaps the wrong word, but in one particular theater. And so our attention ought to be on Asia, because China is identified as a potentially largest adversary. That doctrine has been in place for about 2 years, and that is really helpful in understanding why we're just very slow to help with Ukraine, because we know that we can't get bogged down there and be able to keep our eye on China at the same time. The doctrine has just shifted, or there's a white paper circulating right now that may cause the doctrine to shift to just looking at our own interests, our own homeland, and our sphere of influence identified as, let's say, North America into Central America, Hawaii, Alaska, that sort of thing. If that changes, that is isolationism like you've never seen before, and that will allow aggressors to get even more aggressive, and it's just all bad. So the Department of War name change is actually, while we're doing this, is really like backwards, and it's nothing to get worried about, but this backwardsness of what actually is transpiring is far more worrying.
Yes, and speaking about China's show of force, the parade displayed new weaponry, including hypersonic missiles meant to sink aircraft carriers. This is clearly aimed at a possible war with the U.S. over Taiwan. Do you think that? No, I mean, I'm curious about what was your perception of what was going on in China. What is your take on that?
I think they're trying too hard to look tough. I mean, honestly, they're trying too hard to look tough. Like, think about this. So if you ever meet someone, so I've been into martial arts for many years, right?
Yeah.
And if you ever meet somebody who's not in the martial arts, you'll see them try to look tough and that kind of thing, right? No actual martial arts actually does that. He'll just maneuver himself in such a way that he's ready to kick your head off or grab you or do whatever it is that whatever his martial art is. And he's not going to be loud about it. He's going to be quiet about it. So take that as an analogy, and then look what China did. Then compare it to the American parade, which the Che Baos of RT and those kind of jokers were saying, well, look at this parade. Oh, look how terrible these guys are. Our soldiers were throwing kids candy from the tops of the tanks. That's the kind of parade that I want. If you're really tough, you don't have to try hard to pretend you're tough. So I see it as a nothing burger.
Yes, but Russia has the same. They're just showing off.
Yeah.
The same they had with the pilots. They were, giving all the shows at Le Bourget in France or another one air show in Great Britain. And at the end of the day, I'm not saying they have a weak pilots, but definitely not the best in the world.
And they turned out to be the second army in Ukraine.
Yes, absolutely. True, yeah.
So, I mean, that's what I'm saying. They're trying too hard to show how tough they are. If you ever meet somebody who's really tough, they're not walking around trying to prove to you that they're tough.
But as they say, when somebody is threatening to kill you, you should trust them.
Oh, and that's fair, but I wasn't impressed by what Beijing was doing. Yeah, okay, so they're great marchers. So what? That's not the same as combat effectiveness.
Yes, absolutely. But how long can China...
In a long-range fight, I would put traditional battle kind of something. I don't mean what Ukraine is up against. In a short-range fight, Ukraine and their drones are second to none. In a long-range fight, I put my money on the U.S. As opposed to China. So,
oh yes,
I mean that's just
true.
Yeah,
true.
I'm not worried about it. They don't impress me with their, because you can goose step in sync. That would be great for the Olympics.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. But how long can China maintain this balance between loud statements about peace and its actual display of military power?
So Xi has ambitions, and I don't know what's going to potentially trigger him or not, but kicking off trying to take Taiwan would be a really, really bad idea. And I know this isn't answering your question, but I want to address Xi and Russia here as well. The foreign minister said that they don't want Russia to lose, but I don't think they want Russia to win. I know that sounds kind of weird, but they don't. They want to use Russia. They've made Russia their vassal. It's mercantilism. If you recall what mercantilism is from the 17th century, there's a parent state that sends up colonies like Britain to the United States, and then we would send back raw materials, and they would send us finished goods. And that was a great system right now, Beijing is the senior partner, and Russia's the weaker partner, and they want to hold Russia in that place, and they're going to get a sweetheart deal on oil and gas, but I don't think they're supporting Russia in providing technology and things along those lines, but it's not to the point that they're supporting Russia where they'll actually prevail. They want Russia not to lose, but they don't really want them to win. I know that's hard to understand, but I think that's where Beijing actually is.
Yeah, actually, it's not that hard to understand, because many of experts said that lots of people in Europe, they want the same for Ukraine, not to lose, but not to win, something, but just not.
Well, okay, but see, that was different. That was like in a Biden era kind of thing where they were deterring. They were being deterred by Putin from they're trying not to push Putin too far because he might use nukes or something along those lines, and that's a little bit of a different story. But I just don't think the Europeans really have the will to get, or those that do have the will recognize they don't have the weapons yet and there's going to be a curve. And you see Germany stepping up in a big way, right? Like Germany bringing some ammunition factories online, like artillery factories are starting to get running again. That's the kind of sign that you want to see. If they're doing that, they're starting to get serious.
Yeah. So, just my follow up on this you said earlier. So, how do you see Russia now? They dependent on China, or really they are ally of Beijing?
Increasingly dependent on.
Not ally.
Increasingly.
Okay.
So it used to be that China was down here, right, and Russia was way up here, and over time it just like has shifted, and the war accelerated it. Right? China is, look, by every indicator, by GDP, by population, by what kind of things that can be technologically produced, by every indicator, China is far ahead of Russia. But Russia still sees itself as the former Soviet Union and how impressive it thinks it was then. And so it's going to have a weird wake-up call one of these days.
So are we witnessing then a change in world order, or rather a global disorder?
There's a change. It's weird because China is okay, so part of what motivates the Trump administration here, and I'm going to give it the best possible interpretation, I could be wrong about this, but is that if they could pull Russia off from China, you don't want China and Russia, China being powered by Russia. So if you could separate the two, that would be good geopolitically, because they're coming together because Russia is becoming more dependent on China, if that makes sense. Yeah. So maybe the best possible interpretation is that trying to be kinder to Putin would be to separate him from China, because you really don't want those two together, and neither do their neighbors, right? And Japan doesn't want it, South Korea doesn't want it, the Philippines doesn't want it, Australia doesn't want it. So, but Russia really has no, like, Russia's in such bad shape that it's going to North Korea for help. When you have to go to North Korea for help for anything, it's not a sign that you're tough.
Yes. But what was your reaction? What was your reaction when you heard this little chat caught by Little Mike with Putin and Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un about about the immortality, basically, to live 150 years. I was thinking that dictators, they like to control everything. But there is one thing they cannot control. It's death. What was your what was your impression of that conversation?
That tells you everything you need to know about just how nutty they are.
Yes.
Right? That they're actually thinking in those terms, and they're thinking that they're going to be in power during those times. Look, my dad's in his 90s. He's kind of hobbling along, right? Because that's what you do when you're in your 90s. He's pretty spry for 90s, but you're still in your 90s. What do you think your life's going to be like when you're 114 or 135 or whatever, as you're moving toward 150? And, those organs have to come from somewhere. Are they just waiting for or getting in line and taking from an organ donor, or are they getting some really healthy organs from somebody, or like what goes on in their minds? Like it tells you everything you need to know about just how megalomaniac Putin and Xi are in that sense.
But what was that mean? What does that mean for Ukraine when Putin, Xi Jinping, and Kim Jong-un met at the same place? Is that something? I know it's nothing new. We met them before. Yeah. I mean, this trio. So, I mean, it's nothing new. But here in 2025, do we see any new signals from them?
Yeah. So you'd like to think that they would like you to think, rather, that this is some kind of really big thing, like, look how tough we are. Again, North Korean and Russian officials were fighting with each other over controlling the air conditioning system, right? Like, Putin wanted one setting and Kim wanted it a lower or higher setting, and they're fighting over it. The North Koreans were wiping everything down so there wasn't a trace of Kim's DNA. That included bringing his own bathroom with him. I'm not exactly sure how that worked, but so that there was no trace, so that they couldn't determine if he was ill or anything through DNA samples of Kim to figure out something. Like, they don't trust each other. They really don't. So, and this is how authoritarians are. They cooperate, but they really don't trust each other. Remember what started with World War II and Poland.
Yes, yes. And the Trump's reaction, like a little kid, little boy offended by they all were together and he was not kind of invited on Truth Social.
Yeah. I'm not sure if he wasn't invited, but he was aware that they're kind of plotting, saber rattling, that sort of thing. And in that, he has these like moments where he can kind of see things, and then he kind of goes back to his standard course of he wants to not ruin the relationship that he thinks. I'm going to clarify that he thinks that he has with Putin. I don't think Putin has the same relationship with Trump that Trump thinks that Putin has with him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like a romantic relationship where like he thinks she really likes him and she thinks, I don't really like him. I'll keep him stringing along, but I don't. Yeah, it's kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely true. But could India finally move into the orbit of Russia and China because of its trade war with the US, basically?
Could India?
Yeah.
So that's really the weird thing, right? India and China historically hate each other. I mean, go back over the last couple of decades, and they're at odds with each other.
They haven't seen each other for a long time at the same place.
Yeah.
I mean,
so that was my read is that that's an unforced error on our part by imposing tariffs on India because of the Russian oil and driving India into Chinese arms, where that wouldn't naturally have happened before without our doing that rather than dealing with Putin directly about what we need to deal with Putin with. So, it's one problem exacerbating another.
Yeah, and Trump actually invited both Putin and Xi Jinping to next year's G20 summit in the US, something that he had to do by protocol, I believe, but still, here's the question.
As observers, rather, and said they probably won't want to come as observers, but I'd like to have them there. Look, I'd like the world to be at peace too, but as long as we're not going to be in a condition of peace where Russia's going to do what it's doing to Ukraine, I don't want to encourage them by saying, well, you can come and play nice with the rest of the world while you're doing this to Ukraine. That's not okay. That sends a terrible, horrible message. So we don't want to do that.
Actually, I don't like to speculate with a World War III, but the question that I was not asking a year ago, now I see it more vital to ask. Do you see World War III as a real possibility? And if it doesn't happen, are we instead facing in the future long, simmering conflicts all over the world?
So I think Estonia is showing by what it's doing on its border in Poland and Latvia and Lithuania that they're bracing for something really big and bad from Russia because they're expecting more of this. So I think you go with what they're doing as an indication that this could happen. I see nothing about what the Russians are doing that's telling me that they're wanting to stop. I see the Europeans rearming, even going into debt in order to arm. Right, they're allowing debt, provisions within the EU as long as it's for military purposes. So all those signs seem to show me that something very likely could cook off, and I don't know if it'll be limited or if it'll continue. How we play this tells us how that's going to continue. I mean, if we continue this somewhat appeasing path, then I think it's more likely than if we just ratchet up the pressure like we should have. Yeah,
Baltic countries, they are not choosing appeasing path, definitely. And actually, I've heard from some experts that Russia is kind of provoking Baltic countries, Poland, in the same way they did with the Ukraine in 2022. All these soldiers next to the border, all these drills and propaganda.
Finland as well. They're doing it to Finland.
Yes, yes.
They're doing it in Finland too. So
Absolutely.
I mean, there's nothing new. It's the same script.
Yes.
Anywhere that was potentially historic Russian lands, however they define it, are in jeopardy. And if you're in the Baltic states, you don't want to go back to having been absorbed back into the Soviet Union like they did by force in the 40s. You just don't want that. So you're preparing.
But okay, if Trump realizes he has been manipulated by Putin, what would he do next?
I don't know how to get that through his head. Like, I think the only way that this happens is if there are enough Republicans. And so, there's Democrats and Republicans. There's basically only two parties in the U.S., right? If enough of his own party are saying, Trump, your historic legacy is going to be that you let Putin run all over you and cause World War III. Unless he hears, short of him, like, really digesting that, I just can't see how to dislodge him from his would-be friendship that he holds dearly in his head about Putin. I don't see it yet. And I want to see it. I just don't.
Okay, he will just not accept this as a reality.
I would like to have thought that he would have seen this sooner, and I don't see that he's seeing it. At least not yet. I don't know what's going to cause him to do it, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but I just don't see it yet.
Actually, I was reading some of the articles saying what tactics Putin used that Donald Trump's behave the way he behaves. And there was something like KGB tactics, like on public, Putin very complimentary about Trump, his diplomacy, let's say, and his behavior and everything and policy. So, but in reality, he's just ignoring American president. And somehow, this gaslighting working with the brain.
Yeah, and he's seeding the ground by saying, see, look at all these things that are happening on the battlefield. It's inevitable, and Trump wants to back the winner. And as long as he sees that Russia is the winner, he keeps going down that path. And that seeding of misinformation is going to feed through Trump's advisors, because personnel is policy, and he'll be hearing it from his own advisors that oh, look what the Russians are doing. So when Zelensky got to meet him and show him, like, look, what the Russians have been able to do in the last 1,000 days is take about 1% of Ukraine. 1% with upwards of 1 million casualties. So how are they really doing? I think that was brilliant, because that was kind of breaking through some. But again, he listens to whoever he talked to last. So I just don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah, the final question just comes to my mind. If the war is still going on by the next U.S. election, will any Republicans remain openly supportive of Ukraine? Oh
yeah, there's a split within the Republican Party. I'm a Republican, but I'm not that kind of Republican, right? So I'm like the old school kind of Republican, a Reagan Republican. This is what conservative Republicans were, and then in 2016 when Trump came in, he kind of shifted the party a whole different direction. Like, we're talking about things that Republicans never talked about. Tariffs. Why are we talking about? We're not the tariff crowd, right? We're talking about, like, he just came out with something about 200 executive orders. We've always criticized executive orders. He shifted from where Bush was about, like, look, we have to defend democracy, to why are we involved in that over there? So he shifted the party, and there's a real rift within the party, but the MAGA types are on the ascendancy, and people like me are in the minority within our own party. So what'll happen in the next, I don't know, it's 3 years is eternity away in political time.
I heard that J.D. Vance will run the presidency.
Yeah, I'm sure he would love to. I don't know. Vice presidents don't always become president. Very rarely, actually, it seems. Secretary of States seem to become president more often than vice presidents. And Marco Rubio, who is the most supportive, probably in your corner with Keith Kellogg, is the Secretary of State. That would be a much better scenario.
Much better, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Vance is even worse than Trump, believe it or not.
I
when it
know,
comes
I
to this
know.
sort of thing.
I believe you.
And for Vance, I'll let you tell me why in just a second. But for Vance, it's ideological. With Trump, it's just like I want to be Putin's friend or something like that. It's not so much ideology, but Vance is hardcore ideology. Like he's hardened. So yeah, you said you know what.
About the JD Vance, because I have my American friends and they were telling me, Natalie, you will not believe that JD Vance, Donald Trump comparatively to JD Vance will be kind of a butterfly because JD Vance, he's a true ideologist.
Yes, that's right. Vance is worse. And Trump could turn and go the other direction because ideologically he's not beholden to it. I'm not sure what will turn him, but it could happen. Vance, I don't think is going to move that direction because he's solidly that way. It's kind of like past presidents. You knew that George Bush pointed that way. You knew that Barack Obama pointed that way. Like that was normal. Like you expected that. With Trump, he can kind of vacillate, but he keeps pointing toward Russia just because of that relationship that he thinks that he has with Putin. And most of the world seems to be able to see it except for him.
Yeah, I miss Joe Biden so much, to be honest.
I criticized Biden because he was deterred by Putin, but he was trying to support Ukraine. Trump came in and instead of trying to be on one side supporting Ukraine, he was actually trying to be, I'm going to come in and I'm going to be an honest broker between the two of you and I'm going to bring you together. That was wrong. You should have been supporting Ukraine in order to pushing that forward. But anyway, well, now we have another president and I don't know where it leads to, but yeah, we have to rely on ourselves as well. Much more than to rely at everyone else, I guess. So I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you that the West was more there with you. They're there in spirit and they're there in words, but I'm not sure that they're quite there yet with the actions that they need to be taking. But I see good signs when I see Germany starting up an artillery plant, right? Or multiple artillery plants. That's the right direction. When you start seeing those kind of tangible actions, you know that they're moving the right way.
The right way, yes. And they're arguing to give us finally Taurus to hit Russia. So basically, maybe we will move somewhere from a dead point. Yeah, there was a very great conversation, and I'm really glad you could join me today, and I hope it's not for the last time. And once you're going to be in Kyiv, it's always will be a pleasure for me to have you in our studio here.
Well, thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to be here as well. Please stay safe.
Thank you.